Welcome to our Global Economics Contest presentation. I'm Aryan Pradhan.
I'm Mauli Gandhi.
I'm Divyana Maheshwari.
Avni Castelino.
Our problem statement today is evaluating the motivations and short-term, long-term political, economic, and social impacts of President Trump's protectionist policies, then proposing alternative policy solutions to address their challenges and unintended consequences, either as supplements or replacements.
So going on to section one. In 2024, US-China trade totaled to 532.4 billion US dollars. US exports to China dropped by 2.9% to 143.5 billion US dollars, while imports rose to 2.8% to 438.9 billion US dollars. So this created a $295.4 billion trade deficit, up 5.8% from 2023. So despite tariffs and protectionist policies, the trade gap continues to widen. Tariffs raise prices on Chinese goods, reducing US demand and boosting domestic supply. While they benefit local producers and generate revenue, they also hurt consumers through their high prices and fewer choices. Globally, tariffs distort trade, reduce efficiency, and can lead to retaliation, slowing long-term growth. So, as shown by this diagram here, without the tariffs, consumers in US can import at price PW. The US imports at a wide range from Q2 to Q3. Imports are large because Chinese products are cheap, so PW is less than the domestic price PD. And with the tariff price PW plus T, there's a higher price, so domestic suppliers extend quantity supplied from Q1 to Q2. The higher price causes domestic consumers to consume less from Q4 to Q3, and the government earns a revenue by the tariff shown by the gray area on the diagram. So tariffs haven't reduced US imports significantly due to inelastic demand. Even with tariffs as high as 145%, imports rose 2.8% in 2024. US consumers and businesses continue to buy Chinese goods, often due to the lack of affordable alternatives. In contrast, Chinese demand for US goods is highly elastic. Exports fell 2.9% in 2024, and Chinese buyers quickly switched to cheaper alternatives with tariffs as they rose in the US sorghum exports. For example, they dropped by 95% in the early 2025. So in conclusion, the 2024 data reveals a structural mismatch. Americans keep buying Chinese goods despite tariffs, while Chinese demand for US exports is sensitive to price. Tariffs have failed to narrow the trade deficit and may harm US consumers and exporters. A more balanced and strategic approach is needed. Moving on to section two.
First, the economic short-run impact. The US imposed tariffs as high as 145% on Chinese imports, raising costs for businesses and consumers alike. This led to cost-push inflation, where higher import prices forced companies to pass expenses onto their buyers. For example, tariffs on Chinese-made laptops and smartphones pushed prices by nearly 8%, while home appliances saw a 10% spike. The Federal Reserve estimated that tariffs added a 0.3% to overall inflation, squeezing household budgets. Higher production costs shifted the short-run aggregate supply curve to the left, as we can see on the slide, raising prices while reducing output. And what was the result? Stagflation, slower growth, and higher inflation. Beyond price hikes, the tariffs have also affected the broader economy. Now, for the political short-run impacts. The aggressive tariff policies adopted by the US and China have strained bilateral relations, leading to a widespread economic disruptions in both countries. The US has faced a notable employment decline as a result of trade conflict. According to a 2025 report by the Peterson Institute of International Economics, prolonged trade tensions could cost the US up to 300,000 jobs by 2026. The GDP potentially contracting by $1.8 trillion over the same period. Despite a 5.3% GDP growth rate in early 2025, China's economy remains vulnerable to US tariffs. Analysts warn that these measures could significantly hinder future growth, with institutions like Goldman Sachs already revising China's 2025 GDP forecast down to only 3.2%. Moving on to the social impacts. The rise in tariffs have driven up the cost of everyday goods, placing a heavier financial burden on low-income families who allocate a larger proportion of their earnings to essential purchases. The U.S. tariffs on imports, have worsened income inequality by increasing living expenses. Lastly, while some US industries saw short-term job gains due to tariffs, other, particularly those dependent on global supply chains, suffered losses as production costs rose. Job cuts in sectors affected by trade disruptions are a clear example of structural unemployment. This occurs when the economy changes, such as supply chain in reallocation or automation, permanently altering labor demand, leaving workers' skills mismatched with available jobs. Now, moving on to section 3.
One of the most profound economic effects of Trump's protectionist policies, especially the tariffs imposed during the US-China trade war, was a sharp decline in business investment driven by the growing policy uncertainty. When tariffs were placed on Chinese imports, US firms were left uncertain about future trade relations, input costs, and the global market stability. This hesitation translated into reduced capital spending as companies held back on long-term projects and expansions. According to a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, investment growth among public listed US firms declined by nearly 1.9% by the end of 2020, solely due to trade uncertainty. This is illustrated in the diagram. We can see that uncertainty caused a fall in overall spending, represented by a leftward shift in the aggregate demand curve from 81 to 82. As a result, real GDP fell from full employment output to a lower level, shown here at YREC, and the price level dropped from price level 1 to price level 2. This illustrates a negative output gap and deflationary pressure, both of which are signs of contracting economy driven by reduced investment. On the political front, Trump's trade strategy significantly weakened global trade institutions, most notably the World Trade Organization. Beginning in 2019, the US blocked the appointment of new judges to the WTO's appellate body, effectively shutting it down. This body had settled over 500 trade disputes in 25 years. Without it, countries imposed tariffs with little fear of legal consequence. The absence of a neutral referee has therefore made trade more chaotic and retaliatory, with countries adopting their own protectionist measures. Instead of deterring unfair trade, the US unintentionally normalized protectionism, eroding its own leadership in global trade governance. Finally, the most lasting social impact was a rise in income inequality. Tariffs, while designed to protect American jobs, backfired on many working class communities. China's retaliatory tariffs hit US agricultural exports hard, leading to job losses and reduced incomes, particularly in rural areas and the Midwest. Meanwhile, tariffs raised prices on imported goods like washing machines and clothing, all of which are items disproportionately consumed by low income households. These tariffs acted like a regressive tax, worsening financial strain for the poor and deepening economic divides across regions and economic groups. In conclusion, while the goal of Trump's protectionist policies was to revive American industry, the long term reality includes suppressed investment, weakened global leadership, as well as heightened inequality at home. Now, moving on to section 4.
So, to deal with this problem, there are two key strategies that the government could rely on. First, negotiated trade agreements. These are formal deals between countries to lower trade barriers and open markets under fair and transparent rules. They take time and can be politically sensitive. In the short run, domestic industries might still struggle and governments may face pressure for not acting fast enough. But consumers benefit right away from stable prices and import variety, and diplomatic tensions stay low. In the long term, these agreements offer clear stability. Producers gain reliable access to global markets, consumers keep benefiting from lower prices, and governments strengthen international relations. However, it is important to note that smaller economies may struggle to negotiate their strong terms. In the next slide, let's explore the combined approach of investment and support. This means putting money into infrastructure, education, and technology while also providing targeted help to industries and workers affected by the global trade. Early on, this strategy demands a lot of public spending, and results aren't immediate, but targeted support in the form of subsidies offers quicker relief, protecting both jobs and firms. In the long run, the payoff is big. Investments boost productivity, help businesses compete globally, and give workers better skills and job security. Consumers benefit from better local products, and the economy becomes less dependent on imports. Of course, the success depends on smart execution. Funds need to be well spent, fairly distributed, and support should have clear limits because firms should not become overly reliant on this support. So, to visualize this growth, think of the production possibility curve. Originally, the PPC shows the trade off between good X and good Y. Investment in technology or education improves productivity, allowing more output, QX2 and QY2, from the same amount of resources. The PPC shifts outwards from PPC1 to PPC2, representing what we call economic growth. The final slide shows our citations. Thank you for listening to our presentation.